Welcome to Evangelicalish, where we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of the American Evangelical Church, deconstruction, faith, and God's love through it all. And make sure and stay current on Ish happenings on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Evangelicalish. That's evangelical with an ish. Now to Paul, Jeremy, and April on this episode of Evangelical-ish.
Welcome in, friends, and we are so glad that you are here. Cheers to the family this evening. I am sipping on a Bud Light product because they're a family-friendly company. We learned this week, so I am not pouring these down the drain.
You haven't smashed it with your pickup or anything like that?
No, haven't done anything crazy. I'm not a beer person. I certainly don't like original Bud Light, but I do like seltzer water, so I thought I'd give these a try. These are fantastic. They're 8% alcohol, by the way, so they work. And so anyway, yeah, go support a good family-friendly company that supports trans lives and our friends in the LGBTQI plus community. Anyway, welcome into Evangelical.
Can I tell you a Bud Light story that will mean nothing to anybody, but you know?
Sure.
When I was in high school, Bud Light came out. It was first invented when I was in high school. My best friend, his dad was a Budweiser distributor, and so he would give us free Bud Light as a junior in high school.
Oh no.
He didn't allow his kids to drink, but he gave the rest of us free Bud Lights because he's like, I want you all to grow up being Bud Light drinkers. So my friend would show up and he'd be like, I got something for you in the trunk. And it would be pallets of Bud Light. And so I've always loved Bud Light ever since then.
And now we have reasons to love them even more.
Yes, we do.
And so I went out, not being a beer guy, I'm usually a whiskey guy, love a good margarita, but I do like seltzer water, so I figured I'd give this a shot. It is delicious. It's only 170 calories, by the way. So if you're watching your figure like I am, then this Bud's for you. Anyway, welcome into the show. So glad to have you here on Evangelicalish. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Paul.
And I'm Janice.
And we're super glad that you're here. Just a quick reminder, Janice is with us at least for the month of April, as our April is taking a sabbatical, and we're super grateful for Janice and for the work that she's doing with us right now. Could not be more thankful for that, and just her experience and perspective that she's adding to the conversation. So last week was amazing. I know this week is going to be great too. If you get a chance, go to evangelicalish.com. You can join the community there. Lots of great behind the scenes content. And a Zoom meeting for folks in our top 2 tiers of support. So we would really appreciate it if you would come and be a part of that. So without further ado, Paul, I'm going to toss it over to you. We got a really great guest tonight, so I don't want to take up too much room. I'm just going to sip on this Bud while you introduce our guest.
Bring out your best Bud Light. Yeah, our guest tonight is Joe Weston, or as he told us before the show, he dreams of being J.R. West. So we could call him that too if we wanted to. But Joe's an international trainer, author, lecturer, consultant, coach, professor, an advocate for lasting peace, has worked all over the world bringing conflict resolution, and told us before the show he's banned from Israel, which we're going to have to find out about. And he has a new awesome book out called Fierce Civility, Transforming Our Global Culture from Polarization to Lasting Peace. Thank you, Joe Weston, for joining us on the show tonight. Or J.R. West, we should say.
It's great to be here. You can call me whatever you want. All I have is seltzer water, and I'm a little disappointed that there's no alcohol count in that, but I think I'll just go with that tonight for now. And I realize I got to watch what I say with you guys. Anything is up for grabs, apparently.
Oh, yes.
It is for sure. And so thanks for joining us, Joe. The book is out, and we want to talk with you tonight about conflict resolution. It's a question we get a lot of how do I talk to people in society these days? And so tell us a little bit about what you do and how it led to this book.
Well, I always start by saying I grew up in New York City, and I think that's important. The first body of work I developed before Fierce Civility was called Respectful Confrontation. I wrote a book on it called Mastering Respectful Confrontation. So I've always been involved with how can we have these challenging conversations? How can we deal with the tension that we find ourselves in, and skillfully manage our ways through that so we can come up with new solutions. And all of the work I do is based on like martial arts trainings and sports trainings, that it's not just about the ideas, it's about how can you train yourself to be more skilled as a communicator for win-win outcomes, for bridge building, for really to become nurturer and protectors is really what the basis of Fierce Civility is how do we commit to a deeper level and train ourselves to be nurturers and protectors. Nurturers and protectors for ourselves, nurture and protectors for others, regardless of how we label them as loved one, stranger, or adversary. Nurture and protectors for the planet itself. And in the context of how can we communicate to come up with new solutions, to train ourselves to nurture and protect the integrity of the conversations we're in. And that doesn't seem to be part of the makeup at the moment. And I say, so I always start by saying I was born in New York City, where every day was an examination of confrontation and conflict. And so from a young age, I was really training myself to understand and I come from a volatile situation growing up where my dad was in jail when I was around 12 years old. And fighting was the way to, address things. And yet there was always a part of me that even in all of that, as my way of surviving, I had to fight. I had to be in the arguments. But there was still a part of me that asked the question deep in my heart, which I think is, transcends religion, transcends what you're taught. It's something in the spirit of the heart, where why is it, even though we know better, we're a relatively intelligent species, where I always say we could see close-up pictures of Pluto, right? We can see in the smallest of atoms, we have all the information we need. Why is it, even though we know better, we still have arguments and fights? And on a larger scale, crime and war and hunger and oppression. And most people would say that's just the way we are. And on some level, that's an accurate answer. I was never satisfied with that answer. And all my life has been an examination to try to examine what that is. And the conclusion is it's our human behavior. It's in our human behavior. We as human beings have created the current system that we are in and all of the circumstances. Therefore, what gives me hope is because if human beings created the mess we're in now, human beings can also change it and shift it. So, so I grew up in New York City. I lived for 18 years in the Netherlands, which really opened up my perspective of what it's like to be in the world, and maybe to examine that my truth is not the truth, which is an important part of the Fierce Civility work. And I came back to the U.S. because I just thought, this was around 2003, where I thought, wow, the U.S. needs some loving. Maybe I need to come
You're the
back
guy to bring it. Yeah.
I'm going to do it. I'm the heart man. I'm going to do it. I had this vision of walking, and I might do it sometime. I still might do it, doing a heart walk, which is a route in the shape of a heart around the perimeter of the United States, mainland United States. It's a very long walk. If you all want to join me on that, let me know, and we can organize it, because I just wanted to envelop the U.S. in love, because that's really what it needs right now, and particularly now. That was 2003, 2005, and we're just seeing that just get tighter and tighter and tighter.
Jeremy, what did you show us the heart symbol was last week? Or something like,
Janice sent me a text about this week too. So this is how us millennials / Gen Xers, whatever, this is how we used to do it, or how we do it, right? This is just a clunky old heart, as Janice described it. That is how the kids are doing it nowadays. Either that or the little bitty heart.
Yeah,
the little bitty one.
That's how the cool kids are doing it.
Yeah, but Joe, I did want to ask you a question. You mentioned earlier win-win outcomes. And that would be the ultimate goal for every conversation, for every exchange, for every interaction as humans. Just for our listeners, would you kind of define what a win-win outcome looks like in a textbook way?
Sure, I would love to. So the Fear Civility book, chapter 1, begins with a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt that she said in 1960, at the height of nuclear armament, when there was a chance of nuclear war, like global nuclear war happening. And she said, we have to face the fact that either all of us are going to die together or we are going to learn to live together. And if we are to live together, we have to talk. And that for me was an important part of this whole process. We are so caught in these mental constructs of separation, like nations, race, gender, religion. And I'm not saying any of that is good or bad. I'm just saying that it makes it easier to navigate a world when we put it into labels and compartments. But we don't also realize that it's okay to be different. It's okay to have delineations, but that doesn't mean we're separate. And so we get caught up in this idea and the key point of the book is to understand that we have brilliant ideas that can solve many of our world problems. We've spent millions of dollars in research to get to these conclusions, but we're not going to implement them as long as we are all living with a certain level of trauma and nervous system dysregulation. Personally, individually, whether that's a personal trauma, generational trauma, cultural trauma, and the system itself, the United States of America, is in a serious state of trauma. And again, we can have discussions about whether you see it the same way or whether that's good or bad. It doesn't matter. The system is dysregulated. And what that does is it puts us all in a threat response where we're constantly in a fight, flight, freeze response. And therefore, anything that we perceive as different or new, we're going to see as a threat, perhaps a threat to our very existence. And so I'm just laying out where we are. So there's no way in that kind of energetic or dynamic that anyone's going to open to win-win. But this idea, this isolationist idea, this idea that Republicans or Democrats or Christians or not, that a particular group of people is going to survive what we're going through is really naive on a certain level. And it's really a kind of a short-term idea. And so I just want to start by saying, Eleanor Roosevelt says, we're either going to all die together or live together. And I say we either all win or we all lose. So I think that's the first step, is to realize the idea of winning and losing, it just doesn't work. And we see that in politics, right? We see one administration comes in, everyone's woohoo, yay, and all of that. And they set up policies. It's like American football, what I say, basically. It's like these forces are just pushing against each other. And basically all they're gaining is a yard or two. And all this energy. And if you think about it in politics and in our cultures, with all of the elements, is that if I call the polarization we're suffering from like a stagnant polarization, like two rams that are ramming into each other. I'm right. No, I'm going to win, therefore you have to lose. Right. Another one is like, I'm good, I'm all good, therefore you're all bad. And these internal polarizations are keeping us in this stagnation.
Yeah, and it's like Hatfields and McCoys, right? The only end is somebody doesn't get revenge or you all die. Those are your two choices.
And also, if you think about it on another level, my hate for you is sustaining you in a sense. My hate the hate we have for each other actually is a survival mechanism to keep us in existence. So that's where it starts, Jeremy, with this idea of win-lose it's a luxury. It's a privilege to consider win-lose with the state of the planet and the state of that we're in right now. And so more of us, I think, are getting to a place where we have to see we have to work together. So win-win, what I would say is that to get to win-win means you have to give something up to get to, I use this model of a lot of our terror that we're in, the anxiety we're in, is because we're in such accelerated change. And we were not really trained to manage not a lot of us to manage change and anxiety, and therefore we're in this chronic stress state. And what we have to understand is, for anything to change, you got to first let go of the old. Then you're hovering in this unknown place before you can embrace the new. And I think that the beautiful work that you are all doing is to help people through that process. William Bridges, who he's an American thought leader, he talks about that change and transition. Change is easy. That's the external things. Transition is the psychological process that people have to go through to manage the change. And we all have a different, and the more privilege we have, the more we're invested in the old system, the harder it's going to be for us to let it go.
Yeah. Old wineskins.
Yeah.
I mean, I can say more, but I'll pause there for a moment, and I'd love to hear your reflections on that.
Janice, you want to jump in?
Ooh. Yeah, it all sounds great. Sounds great on paper. But I'm with Paul W in the comments here, and I'm, what if half the country thinks they still win when they die? Or like, coming as a Black woman,
Yes.
there are people who, we all win together, we all live together, or we all die together, who would be fine with, no, we'll live and you die, and that's fine with me. So I guess, I'm thinking a lot of things, but I guess my biggest question right now would be, is how fierce civility, how are we defining civility? Like what even is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I one of the chapters in the book is from chronic niceness to fierce civility. And it's understanding that, right now, the level of lack of civility, the level of violence that we're seeing in our rhetoric and on social media, the way we're treating each other, the way the power over system is still treating people, civility is not going to be able to match that. And what I'm seeing is that oftentimes we think we have only two options, either to be aggressive or to be passive. And that our old definition of civility really may have served a few privileged few throughout the centuries, namely white Europeans. And if you look at the dictionary definition of civility, it's about being refined and having a refined taste and polite. And I just cringe when I hear that. And as I say, that's very elitist, and it may have worked for a number of centuries for very few people, but that is not where we are on this planet, and that is not going to meet the level of lack of civility. So what it's calling on is a synthesis. I call it an alchemy of both civility and fierceness, and fierceness coming from the courage to speak your truth, the courage to live your life according to your own values. And I've worked with people around the world where living according to who they truly believe they can be killed for that and tortured for that. That's fierce. There's a Taoist parable that I bring up in the book that the teacher says to the student, what's more powerful, a mighty oak or a blade of grass? And the conclusion to the story is that a mighty oak is powerful, but in a monsoon, it's going to snap like a twig, and the blade of grass will always persevere. And for me, what we're finding is that we're seeing communities, disenfranchised communities, oppressed communities, who are stepping up, embodying this level of fierceness from a place of vulnerability, that is a fundamental theory in my work. It's in your vulnerability that your true power is revealed. And if you follow that train of thought, then the person who needs external manifestations of power, like guns or however you might say, the more you or creating policy that oppresses others, or sarcasm, or on social media, the way people treat each other, the more you need those external senses of power, the less you truly believe your own power. And I think we're in a paradigm shift where we're seeing that that power is coming from within. So I would say that that's where it starts, and that in what you're saying, Janice, I honor what you're saying, and I would love to hear more about your thoughts on that. But it starts with being safe. That we have to get rid of a lot of our polarizing ideas. It's not 50-50. That we break it into 50-50, this or that, and that there are people on the extreme left that are not going to be able. You're not going to be able to sit down with them and come up with new solutions. There are people on the extreme right. You're definitely not going to be able to sit down with them and come up with new solutions. But I truly believe that those percentages are small. The media wants you to believe it's larger, that it's 50-50, because they profit from that. They profit off of conflict. But I believe that and then people I talk to, that there are more people that even though they have their own views, they still want to find a way to communicate with civility. And they still might want to find win-win solutions.
Yeah. So, you mentioned earlier that there was, that everyone comes, experiences threat or trauma. My question with that would be, is what you're talking about, this fierce civility, is it achievable since we've all experienced threat and trauma? And then also on top of that, the natural greed. I tell people all the time, communism looks great on paper, right? Like it looks great. If you read the Communist Manifesto, you'd be like, oh, we're all equal. We all just get sent to do what we're supposed to do. Like we make,
Right.
X amount of money, whatever. So I say communism looks great on paper unless there's someone greedy, and there's always someone greedy. So is this fierce civility with the thoughts of not just threat and trauma achievable, but also the natural greed of many humans who would choose to use someone's fierce civility against them? So do you see this as something that's achievable for the greater society, or is it all going to be like just a small handful of folks that are trying to express that into the culture?
Yes, I think that I love that you named that. I mean, like one of the number one issues that we're seeing is greed. That even the great economists couldn't imagine the level of greed that we're seeing, and it's accelerating. And I think fierce civility is not an end of its own. It's a means. It's the basis of fierce civility is that it's not only about the what, it's also about the how. So what fierce civility does is it just provides the tools to be more skillful, to be in the conversations. And those conversations do have to be one-on-one. That's where it starts. And I offer a blueprint of lasting peace in the book. I offer a pathway of hope and a blueprint for lasting peace, and something that I've been using in transformational leadership trainings I've been doing in various parts of the world, and other people are using as well, where the formula is, how do you approach a power over system? And we just are seeing that by fighting the system, you're just feeding the system. And just making it stronger on a certain level. Acquiescing to the system, of course, is just making it stronger as well. But to be able to, and how do you confront a bully without becoming a bully? That's another thing, is that the bully system, if you approach it as a bully, they've just pulled you in and you become part of the bully system. So how can you stand your ground? And it's really about the power of the heart, power of compassion, the power of respect, the power of curiosity. And I offer, and this is not just what I say, like a Hallmark cardy sentimental idea of the heart, but transformational power of the heart, which we see in our great teachers, including one which I think you guys know pretty well, that this idea of the transformational power of the heart and their skills and strategies. And I would say, so that power over system, the way to approach it, it's a long-term thing, because I also have a whole section in the book where I say that peace and lasting peace are two very different things. But to get to a culture of lasting peace, which is what you're talking about, how to create a society where people treat each other with, for me, civility means activating within yourself and treating others in the same way with respect, dignity, which means for me being valued, belonging, freedom, and collaboration. And the first step is to be able to say, I deserve that, and I realize I have to earn that. I don't have a right to it. That's already a growth thing. The second one is, if I want that for myself, then I can also offer that to others. And the third one is, imagine if I was committed to creating systems where more human beings on this planet can have access to respect, dignity, belonging, freedom, and collaboration. And so the structure for that, to overcome the power over system, is to start first with power within, cultivating that within yourself. And you see that with great teachers, you see that with people we admire. That radiates out to power with, where we create strong alliances. We've become stronger now, and then on the scale of us versus the power over system, suddenly with these alliances that are thriving, that are flexible, that are durable, that are resilient. If we're resilient, if our relationships are resilient, we then can gain more leverage and scope of influence to go to the last one, which is power two, to create structures for others. And I think that is a way of overcoming the strong greed. It's idealistic, but it starts with the individual, and it starts with, I think there are enough people who, I'm going to keep saying that over and over again. One of the main premises in the book is the way out of what we're in is committing to finding alliances in surprising places.
I'm a visual learner. And so can you describe, so Uncle Fred comes over on the family holiday, and he's a racist, right-wing, Bud Light smashing, a little bit of a nutball, Uncle Fred.
At least for now. By Christmas, he's going to be fine. We saw how that worked for Disney. They all have a Disney Plus account.
Yeah, exactly. How do we deal with Uncle Fred in your first civility view of interaction?
I think it's first, using common sense and saying, is it worth being in dialogue with is it Uncle Fred or Cousin Fred? Uncle Fred.
Uncle Fred.
Uncle Fred. Is it worth it? And I think that's in with what we're dealing with as well, is the person going to be receptive to a perm? If they're not, then why waste that energy, and why you're just adding to the tension. And so it's a question of just seeing who might be more receptive, and then it's an appeal to the heart, because I've coached people with this who have these situations where I help them see that maybe not someone as drastic as Uncle Fred, we know how Uncle Fred is, but with a family member who's caught up with some of the stuff you see on social media and all of that, or in church or whatever, and have seen the shift in the relate, to be able to appeal to the heart and say, listen, I miss who we were with each other 2 years ago. I miss you. I miss what we had. My heart hurts. And that goes a long way. If we're just going to get stuck in the theories, one of the things, the pivots, because when we get in the stagnation, it's about finding a pivot. One of the pivots, if we get stuck in the right-wrong loop, which is basically I'm right and you're wrong, and we can get stuck in that for decades, is to ask the question, do I want to be right or do I want to be effective?
Is there, so, you mentioned this, this guy that maybe some of us are familiar with. I assume you were referring to Jesus earlier.
Boo. Just kidding.
Oh, wait, whoa, whoa.
Hey, Jesus is cool. It's his followers that we can't stand.
I didn't say Carl Lentz. I said Jesus.
He's the most misunderstood human being on the planet.
Right?
Listen, he's my problem now, not yours. Okay. Let me be the judge of that. uh, you know, you mentioned Jesus, and I certainly still find myself as someone who tries to model my life, actions, thoughts, responses after the teachings and the actions and the thoughts and the responses of Jesus. I think I've seen a few questions like this in the chat, and one for me personally. Um, I agree that appealing to someone's heart or trying to connect with them on an intimate level matters. But at what point do you go from I'm going to sit here at your table, Zacchaeus, and have a conversation with you to I'm going to roll up in your house and flip the tables? Is that ever appropriate? And at what point does that become appropriate to be that outspoken into the culture or or is that just not what fits inside of fierce civility?
I think there's the idea of the fierce civility is that you're in a constant calibration of how fierce you need to be and how civil do you need to be, and that you want to find the right balance. And the only way you're going to know that is if your nervous system is regulated in that moment and you meet the person where they are. That's one of the skills. The whole book is filled with skills and strategies, and one of them is meeting the person where they are. And I saw someone in the chat say, my parents said, if you're going to be all liberal on me, I don't want to have a discussion or whatever. Sorry, I didn't see the name. And I think to be fierce in that is to say, do you really understand what you're doing? Do you really understand the ramifications? Yeah, if you're going to be all liberal now, we're not going to have a discussion. So what's the pivot there? The pivot is to first say, what do you want to discuss? That's a pivot. What do you want to discuss? Why don't we make a list of things we can discuss? And let's start there. Or to just, in a sense, meet them where they are and to say, do you realize what you're doing? Are you okay with the fact that you're not letting me express myself and my voice? And if they say yes, and say, okay, I've got good information. And I'm not saying that's a resolution, because there is no resolution. At that point, there's no resolution. But to just, in a sense, it's giving it back to them to say, you have to take responsibility for this, that this is going to have some impact on our relationship. So in terms of meeting people where they're at, sometimes it might need to be turning the table over, as long as you don't harm anyone, if that's what needs to happen. That's what we saw in Tennessee, in Nashville. There's a lot to say about that, about the choices that were made there on both sides, from the protesters and from the ones who expelled the protesters. I think that's a great examination of, it's not about the what, but the how. How are you approaching it? And do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? And sometimes it does require to just, it's just a cry out to shake people out of what they're in.
It's I want to have relationship with you, but I can't if you're not going to honor these boundaries, kind of a thing.
Yeah. And there's no quick solutions, right? So for I think it was Kate to be able to say, that's speaking your truth and standing in your power without harming yourself or others, to just say, okay, based on you're making these decisions now, just know that there are consequences to that. And I want to let you know how it makes me feel. And you don't need to do anything with that, but you need to know before I leave here, whatever, how it makes me feel. And that may take them a week, it may take them a year, it might take them 10 years for them to cycle through that. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it with clients. I've seen it with groups.
If I could jump in, Joe, Janice, I'm interested to hear, after your interesting question, how are you feeling hearing all of this? Because I'm I'm interested to see, there's a lot of cynicism in our comments of this. I'm interested to know how you're feeling, if I can ask.
Yeah. Shout out to Paul W. in the comments. He is me. So many of his comments and his thoughts, I'm like, yes, that. I think there's just levels to everything, and there's so many different conversations and just situations that I'm thinking of. But like, even just that, for me, this all again sounds beautiful, also sounds extremely privileged. And so that idea of, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? What if I just want to be safe? And so,
Yes.
those things they're not even in play for me. And, when you said, this isn't a quick fix, and this, we're talking about lifetimes here. And for me, that just like breaks my heart, because we've seen lifetimes come and go. And, we're having a lot of the same fights that, my ancestors were having. Not my like, we don't have to go that far back. Like, some of the same issues we're facing now are things that my grandmother went through, and like we've cycled back around. So, life, sometimes for me, I'm thinking about, I'm like, it's not worth it. First of all, I can't even have some of these conversations. Some of these are just not for me. Race this Uncle Fred. That's nobody I ever want to talk to. That's nobody I ever need to talk to. Nothing good can come of that for me. So that's you guys' work. And then I have to depend on you to do that work. Because if you don't, then things for you don't necessarily change, but things for me stay the same or get worse. And so there's also just this element of, again, I don't want to be right. I don't want to be effective. I just want to be safe. I just want to enjoy my life. And so sometimes, thinking about a lot of it, it's not worth it for me to be fierce or civil with certain people. And, like Paul said, what if it's not just racist Uncle Fred. It is that racist Uncle Fred is on the council, and he is in the government, and he is in this seat of power. And so, yes, there is a place where we can be having these conversations one-on-one, and it's doing nothing. It might be, helping my relationship with my coworker or something, but it's not doing anything about my rights. It's not doing anything about, housing inequalities. And even that trauma that you spoke of at the beginning, like, we're all living under these traumas. And again, it's a very different ball game. If you don't deal with your traumas and your life, you're fine, you're set. But your traumas are going to be affecting me in a way that I just can't. There's nothing I can do about that. Like, if you guys don't do the work, there's only so much that I can do. And it doesn't even behoove me to like be in these conversations. And then it becomes a thing of, okay, like, I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, okay, who can I have conversations with? And honestly, how can we go away from everyone else and kind of build our own thing, in the hopes that maybe one day we would be big enough or have enough power to not necessarily strike back, but just to stand or to make something of our own that's different. Like, if we're talking about, America, in a lot of ways, yeah, I'm extremely cynical and have given up hope in a lot of ways. And it's like, I'm not looking to negotiate anymore, honestly, because I don't, the trust isn't there, and it's it's just, how do I get away from this? I don't want to be involved anymore, honestly.
It's like the target kept moving, right? So you just quit trusting it because at first it was like, just for example, like recently, it was like, well, if y'all would just, protest quietly and show us, the civil rights movement, like Martin Luther King, So what happens? Colin Kaepernick takes a knee. He's tired of police brutality. NFL players start taking knees. Well, that wasn't good enough, because now they're disrespecting the flag and being inappropriate, and that's, whatever. And then it jumps from that to, then we start seeing protests in the streets, and cities start burning and things like that. Whoa. Now you're just looting and tearing the whole city down. Well, you didn't listen when we took a knee. So like, I can't say, it's not for me to say, obviously. But what you're saying resonates with me because the bullseye kept moving, and they kept just pushing the goal line down the road. Yeah. And then eventually at some point you just got to be tired of like chasing the never attainable goal line.
So Joe, how does Fierce Civility respond to Janice's very
Well,
transparent sharing.
I think I would rather, as Joe, respond to Janice and say thank you for sharing what you said, and it's important to be said, and I hear that a lot with communities that I do work with, and I try to use fierce civility as an ally, and I'm fierce in that because I think that is where the change is going to happen, and you need to rest. Is what it is. I need to do the work and you need to rest and heal and take care of yourself. And I've said that in communities where they said, Joe, what do we do? And a black woman, an activist, where she said, what would you recommend? And I said, you need rest. You're exhausted. And what can we do to support you in that? And you speak to something that is the fundamental part of the fierce civility strategy and skills is you have to create a safety of more of safer and more trust space. And if the safety is not there, then you don't engage. And there's no need for you to engage in those conversations. I think that is the key. And I think that so in terms of for the people who want to see shifts, who can step in and do that, I'm prepared to do that. And I think there are more people that are prepared to do that. And I think that I can understand, I don't have the time. It's got to happen now. Yes. First, what needs to happen is safety needs to be created. We need to do that. But to come up with new solutions, we have to consider whether we like it or not. People don't change; they transform. And that we see that in oppressed societies. We see that with Christianity. We see that with other traditions and other religions, is trying to change people to be what they want them to be. That's violence. Because people don't change. People transform. And what transforms are viewpoints, habits, and patterns. And so the basis of this is if you want to see cultural transformation, you have to meet people where they are, create a space of safety and trust, figure out if this is worth the investment. And when you meet them where they are, slowly walk yourself and them to a new way of seeing something. People will not transform their viewpoints, habits, and patterns if there's no safety and trust. And unfortunately, that can't be rushed. But what you accomplish with that idea of transforming as opposed to changing that's lasting transformation. You've really shifted something. And Janice, I understand you're seeing it from a different perspective in terms of the groups I'm working with and the organizations. I am seeing that there are more people who are ready for this discussion, who are questioning. For the last 15 years, I've been saying the bad news is that the systems as we know them are crumbling. The good news is the systems as we know them are crumbling.
Sure.
And that we're in the liminal, in the in-between place, and it's painful. And the people who have been disenfranchised are the ones who are continuing to suffer the most and have to hold the most. And I've been trying to get that message out, that we have to step up. We have to, and that's the greed part, Jeremy, you're talking about. The more we benefit from the system, the harder it's going to be for us to A, want to change the system, but B, let go of, be uncomfortable and sacrifice something. If people are saying, yeah, that's terrible, they're like, the majority of people are probably saying, it's terrible what's happening to those people. But my 401k,
Yeah.
and it's those people we need to get to. And and at least that's where I see that's a strategy.
And Janice, if I can say, I'm not racist Uncle Fred, but I'm definitely one of those people. I remember.
Your Uncle Paul.
I'm Uncle Paul. I think it was probably Ferguson, where I was like, I'm trying to change the church from inside. I don't want. I'm trying to stop this Republican nonsense thing. I don't want to take that on. And definitely around George Floyd, and I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that, but somebody, a friend of ours, sat my wife and I down, kind of in essence, and said, "Hey, you guys don't know what you don't know," and we heard, and we challenged ourselves to say, "Oh my gosh, the problem is me. It's not racist Uncle Fred. Actually, the problem is me. I am the white moderate here." And so I don't know if that, I don't mean to, I don't want this to be patronizing or white savior or any of that stuff. If there's any encouragement, it's like, yeah, somebody like me heard and said, I want to change. And maybe that's, and now I want to go fucking kill those other guys that are doing all this shit. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know what all that means, but I just felt like I wanted to share that.
Janice, I'm curious what your thoughts are on some of the things that I said. You don't have to answer, but
all of it, again, all of it is beautiful, and I'm not against any of it, but I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking, this is not for me. It's just not, like, I'm just not, I'm not there. I can take these principles and definitely apply it more on one-to-one. And like, the thing is, again, there's levels to everything. So it's not just that there are big conflicts that are overshadowing all of us and that we're all being affected by. But then there's conflicts within our communities and within our families and within our friendships. So, like, yes, there is some level where this would work and would be helpful. But like big picture, when I'm thinking civility, and I'm like, okay, how do we transform the world? And the answer is we don't, and we can't. And part of it, I think, also, just the comfort is always hanging over all of this, and people don't change, don't transform until they are uncomfortable enough for whatever reason.
Yes.
And so, again, a lot of us live in a certain amount of discomfort, and have gotten used to it to a certain extent. So we don't even expect much. But again, I'm waiting on people like Paul and Jeremy, to get uncomfortable and to get, and to be transformed. And so to hear Paul's story and be like, oh, like that's beautiful. And I'm annoyed a lot of the times that, even in the evangelical space and deconstruction, and some of my favorite people are white men. And that is so irritating to me. But like, I know the change is possible, and I've seen it, and it's needful, and it's beautiful, because it's going to take white men to change it, honestly.
Right.
Again, there's just a lot of power. There's a lot of things that I just can't do. And, when I hear these conversations, I hear the whitewashing of MLK, right? Like it's, people love to be civil now and to be polite now. And now we all want to be polite. And now we all want to, hate can't drive out hate. Only love can do that. Well, it's easy to say that when you have your ancestors used hate for generations, use violence. Violence is never the answer. Say the violent, right? And it's like, I don't know. I think about it too from, an evangelical standpoint, and just kind of the idea of, sowing and reaping, or karma, or whatever you want to call it. And I just feel like there is a level of fear running through white people, running through whiteness all the time, that has been there from the beginning, so George Floyd, what happened to Ferguson, all of these things, right, are because we're so afraid of Black people. And we've taken on this caricature, and we're violent, and we're whatever. It's like, no, the fear is retribution, like, and it always has been. And there has to be somewhere, right? Like, you reap what you sow, and you just have to. And I think that level of fear is sitting there. And because whiteness has never cooperated with anyone else, honestly, they've always come in, done damage, and then want to turn around and say, no, new rules now. Don't do that to us. And nobody's seeking to do that, but it doesn't matter because that fear is there, and that's the operating system. And it's this idea of, because we have come in and we've never cooperated with anyone, we've never seen it done, we can't imagine equality. We can't imagine the tables turning in a way that isn't vicious and cruel and whatever. And we don't want that to happen to us. And so I think secretly people will go, well, I want to be nice. I want to be a good person, but also I want to keep my shit. And I can't lose it. And so if there were a way for you all to have your rights and have as much as me, and me still keep all of my stuff, I might consider it.
Yeah.
But that can't happen because, again,
like, if I'm
greed is
losing
always
anything-
operating. Right. I'm willing to give up a certain amount,
Right.
but I don't want to lose it all. And I know it's possible to lose it all because I've seen what has happened to other people.
Yeah, we're afraid if we give up power to you, you'll do to us what we did to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. Wonder why you feel that conviction.
Yeah.
You know, like
Right.
like that's the Holy Spirit. You know, not the kick drum. So,
Right. What?
well, I just wanted to ask Janice one question because I was interested about this, and I think some people in the chat were as well. You know, so Joe said something that to me initially resonated, like, oh yeah, you know, when he said that, you know, we want to tell those, you know, the black women to, you know, look, you've done so much work, like, you know, it's your turn to rest. But I think the fair question for you, and I want to pose this to you, Janice, is, do you feel safe enough to rest?
In some ways,
Like,
in
it's
some
like sleeping
ways,
with one eye open, right?
yeah. And in certain places and certain spaces, yes. But overall, like, in general, no. And like, we're not allowed to. And because it's not just about, like, sometimes my revolution is not going to the protest or not keeping up on the news. Like, again, this idea, there is a level of freedom that I know that I have accepted I'm not going to see in my lifetime. Like, things are not going to get fixed. Like, they're just not. And so part of my revolution is, okay, how can I just live the best life that I can live? How can I enjoy myself? Because it doesn't, you know, it's not fair that we have to be martyrs and we have to, in fighting for this freedom, we never get to experience any of it. So there is a level of, yeah, the best I can do sometimes is to do nothing and to rest. But then at the same time, you know, just had someone, you know, in my comments on Instagram, you know, where we're being held to this standard. So I can't really rest because I'm still being watched, and I'm still being held to standards. And again, if I'm going to be in this space and I'm going to be speaking for whatever. So I still have to mind my P's and Q's, and I have to know, yeah, I can push things a little bit because I'm funny and I'm fun and whatever. So there are certain things I can say and do and get away with it because I'm shucking and jiving, honestly, right? Like, I'm dancing the dance that you like, and I say, you know, oh, she's fun and she's funny, so she can get away with it. But again, only to a certain level, because if I get a little too sassy, a little too snippy, then people are very quick to remind me, no, that's impolite. That's
Right.
You can't say that. You can't do that. Here's the standard of behavior, and you're not meeting it. Or, you know, just it's just funny to me, you know, just the supremacy that just comes through. And, you know, it's usually 99% of the time, you know, some white man just coming in and trying to tell me something as if I've never heard it before, or as if, you know, they're the authority over me, or like they've decided today, this is not what you should be doing with your Instagram account. And here I am,
to
tell you.
remind you of that.
Yeah. And so it's always just this, here is your place in society. And this is how much rest we will allow you, as long as, again, we're comfortable with it. But as soon as you do something that breaches my comfort level, whatever, the whole of our history is going to come screaming back at me. And so, yeah, it is very much sleeping with one eye open.
Nobody
all
ever
the time.
says white on white crime. That's never a phrase. And nobody ever says, oh, you're a well-spoken white person. Like, nobody ever says those things.
Right.
And so I think what you're saying is so valid in the sense of, like, even when people are even trying to encourage or empower, like, or they think they are, right? It's still so disconnected from your truth and your reality.
It's still coming from a privilege. It's still coming from that comfort you're saying. I mean, I remember one time talking with a colleague and who is very much open to diversity and all of that, and she said, I don't see any problem. I mean, I feel like I'm colorblind. And I said respectfully, but fiercely, I said, can I give you some feedback? And she said, yeah. She says, that's the last thing that people of color want to hear, is that you're blind to what they're going through. So what you're saying is that you've equalized everyone, and that is the last thing that they need from you. They do need you to include them, but they need you to see. They need you to see what is happening and get activated and get uncomfortable and get into action. And I'm not saying that's the greatest thing in the world, but it's just an example of what I try to do to shift that. And that is the basis of the work, is that it is actually getting people from idea to action. And that one of the pivots is that uncomfortable doesn't necessarily mean unsafe. And that's different what you're saying, Janice. I mean, that's a fundamental lack of safety and trust. But for people who have comfort and are stuck in their greed, and the greed can be something as simple as I need to earn $3 trillion, but I don't want anything to jeopardize my 401k or whatever. Is how do we get people activated into that uncomfortable? But the nervous system doesn't know the difference between uncomfortable and unsafe. And therefore, that's why we need training to be able to feel, because when we're not trained and when we come from a trauma situation, just the slightest discomfort is going to be interpreted by the nervous system as unsafe. And so to call more people into these conversations and to train people, this is where the training is like martial arts and the sports training. Train people to be skillful in the uncomfortable so that they can stay in the tension of these difficult conversations and situations longer, so that new solutions can emerge. And the win-win, coming back to that, is that there are solutions that don't exist yet. And I do believe that in one of the parables that I tell is that all of the problems to our human situations already exist. And they were like one big landscape, and they got fragmented like into puzzle pieces. And the more that we became compartmentalized and we've separated, we've taken our puzzle piece and we're holding on to it. And so for me, the mission is, how can we get people with disparate viewpoints, people in a safe environment, to come together and to reveal the puzzle pieces? Janice, you did that so beautifully tonight. And to be in the messy of that. And that can take months, years, or whatever. But when we can all show up with our puzzle pieces, then we can put the pieces together and we can see a new landscape.
Is that? I mean, I hear the analogy there a little bit, and I did a little bit of boxing for a very short time when I was younger, and the coach used to say, to be a good boxer, you have to be willing to take a punch. You have to be able to get punched in the face, or you cannot be a good boxer, And so maybe what I hear you saying, Joe, in light of what Janice, the really important stuff she's sharing tonight, is somewhat, this is for us as allies to say, I've got to get uncomfortable. That a Christian
Yes.
reads the story of the woman caught in adultery, or that story we call, and says, they love the go and sin no more part. But what we need to hear is, like, Jesus put his reputation, his career, even his life perhaps on the line for this marginalized person. And so I guess that's what I'm hearing a little bit from all of this, is me as a privileged person has to be willing to lose something to be able to provide a safe space for Janice and people who have been historically marginalized in our culture.
Yeah. We have to break the rigidity of our mental constructs that we're separate, and realize that for those of us who have the opportunity, who have some level of privilege and power, to see that the plight of someone else, I can't be totally free if that person's not free. And that's something I fundamentally believe, is that my freedom is dependent on yours, your freedom is dependent on mine. And I cannot be free. That's my personal, from my Buddhist practice and from my martial arts and how I work. I can't be free until everyone is free. That's a big burden, but I can't help myself. And because then that comes back to the privilege thing, is that, if I just feel like I've got my own freedom and I got mine, then goes back to this idea of the win-lose paradigm, and that's not working. And we don't know, particularly Americans, having lived outside of the United States, Americans really don't know how to do win-win. Americans really, generally speaking, don't really understand how to have debate as opposed to argument. And so these are skills that we need to open to. And I believe that if we want to see lasting change and lasting peace, it's got to start somewhere.
Where is the line between flipping tables and having an unhealthy response? I think many of us are so angry about the mass shootings, and still fucking Republicans. Well, there's nothing we can do because Second Amendment, and the best thing that's happened in a long, long time are these amazing high school students shutting down government.
Yeah.
Saying, you will not do business. And we have this legislator in Nebraska who is filibustering their entire session to save trans kids. I almost feel like, man, I need to find an outlet like that where I can say, fuck you, world, fuck you, America, so that I can have some hope of something changing, Joe. So what is the line in that, I guess, is
I would just say that it starts with the self in terms of where are you putting your attention. And one of the fundamental questions with this work is, who's telling your story? And I think that's the first thing. I think that's what many of your listeners, I would imagine, are contemplating. And the media is doing a good job of telling our story. Just the idea of saying Republicans are the ones who are doing it, I think we need to break that down. It's not Republicans or Democrats. It's a few very, very, very greedy people. And I think if we can, and I'm not saying that's true, it's a viewpoint, but by just saying it's the Republicans, then you're losing out on possible alliances in surprising places who are also fed up with it. So who's telling your story? And to realize the media is really telling us a story that's full of conflict, because that's what they want us. They keep us in dysregulation. And what story do you want to tell? And I would just say, please make it a story of fierce hope. And even if it's hard on certain days. And that starts with, where are you putting your attention? I actually, in one of the programs I have, Reviving the Global Heart, which I do, I gave a talk about at the same day, I think, that our former president was indicted, that these kids in Nashville marched out of school. And it was hard to hear all the people who were celebrating the former president being indicted, like that was going to solve all our problems. Very short term, kind of like revenge, like justice kind of thing, like, that the justice has happened. and not realizing that there's a lot of ramifications for that. And I just said, I choose to put my attention on these kids. They're our hope. And that there are more and more people who are stepping up. The media doesn't let you know that because it's not sexy. It's not profitable, but it's happening with grassroots organizations I'm working with, not only in the US, but around the world. The number of people, hundreds of thousands of organizations that are working towards global peace. And again, it's not happening overnight, but there is a shift. So how do you deal with the anger of that? How do you, that, you know, that it starts with where you're placing your attention.
I think, you know, we kind of used the boxing analogy earlier, talking about just, you know, being willing to take a punch or whatever. I think I'm reminded of a very famous Mike Tyson line. And especially when it comes to like white cis het males in our culture, we are some of the weakest people in all of humanity, because we have to have the power to feel like we have any control and or have any regulation or even any safety, you know, all those kinds of things. But you know, it kind of goes back to when Mike Tyson said everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. You know, like I feel like it's really easy for us to sit in these spaces and talk about the changes that we want to see. But I think there's some beauty in the conversation of getting really uncomfortable and getting punched in the mouth a few times and getting back up. Like, I think that's what has to happen. And it's not just in our relationships with our Black brothers and sisters. It's not just in our relationship with our LGBTQIA plus siblings, but it's in relationship with every community that is less privileged or more marginalized than we are, which would equal every other community, period. Mm-hmm. My thing is that if you've never needed an amendment to the Constitution to have rights, you probably should think about that for a second. And that's only us. Like, that is only white men in our country. Yeah. And so I think that the challenge is that we need to get into the dirt. We need to get into the mud, and we need to be willing to get punched in the face a few times, even in a way that's challenging, right? Like, I remember we've had Jess Eaton on the show. She does some amazing anti-racism content. I remember commenting on one of her videos early on when we were all kind of blowing up on TikTok together. And I said, "Oh, louder for the people in the back." And she responded to me with a video, and she said, "But do you think they would really listen to me, even if I was louder?" And that just challenged my thought and my heart so much. Yeah. In that space.
Yeah, because even with the boxing analogy and being willing to get punched in the face. Well, if Jeremy and I go into a ring, he can be very willing to get punched in the face by me. I'm not going to be as willing to get punched in the face by him. Like, it's also who are you fighting with? Like, I think, again, it's a level of comfort. Some people are very comfortable getting into a boxing ring with me. Yeah, they'll take a punch from me, but it doesn't matter. Like, when it comes to these conversations, like, it's not even about, honestly, at this point, it's not about how much are you willing to do, for marginalized communities. That's great. We all have a bit of saviorism in us, and want to feel like we're shielding the underdog or doing whatever. But it's not about how much are you willing to do. It's how much are you willing to lose, honestly. Like, how many times are you willing to get punched in the face by somebody who can actually hurt you for a community that might never thank you for it? Might never know. No one may ever know. It might cost you more than you ever get for it.
Or may still even look at you as one of them, right? Like, you are still, like, not safe.
Yeah.
Are you willing to go to bat in spaces and still be, not win the, not be invited to the cookout, so to speak, right? Like
Well,
that's
it's
challenging too.
again, it's the Jesus model that, they came to Jesus and said, "Are we right to assume that you have a demon and are a Samaritan?" Like the two of the worst things you could be. And so, yes, Janice, it's fighting status quo and the system and being punched in. I'm willing to lose status. I'm willing to lose income
So,
to try to see something change. Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I find it interesting because this work is based on martial arts, and mostly Tai Chi and Aikido, where it's where you learn how to take the attack of another and divert it, and in this model is to take it and actually use it to get deeper into connection, or turn it against, to pivot it so that you call people out where you disarm their strategy without disempowering them. Now, sometimes you need to disempower, but the idea is, that's the fierce civility part of it, is that I don't need to take the punch. I will take the punch if it means it's going to lead to something. That's my own personal, I've done my work throughout my life to be able to get to that point. That's a personal thing. You can't tell someone to do it. No one's just going to do it. And I have strategies where the punch isn't so hard, but I can actually divert it and use it. But Janice, what I want to say is that you helped me get to a deeper level of understanding this work. So I want to thank you for that. That a deeper level of understanding the essence of this work, that to practice fierce civility, you're practicing stepping into walking the planet as a nurturer and protector. And that's not just a kind of like a sweet kind of thing, but what does that really mean? And not just nurture and protect yourself, not just nurture and protect your loved ones and those like you, but to really do the inner work to increase that capacity, that it's a spontaneous thing that you have to do. That or not have to by obligation, but you just can't help not doing it. So I want to thank you for helping me deepen that of what that actually means to be a nurturer and protector.
So can we be present to, this has been a bit of a tough conversation, right? We've had to dig a little deep tonight. And so thank you, Janice and Joe, for drawing us to that. And I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it, Janice. And what I would love, Joe, is you are a practitioner of Buddhism. Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
And so we love to experience other views of spirituality on this show. And a lot of evangelicals are like, ooh, there's something evil about anything that's not Christian. Or could you just give us a little demonstration of what that practice looks like to help us recover from this tough conversation, perhaps?
There you go. Well, I'll say for people who feel that the demons might come, is that if you do this, just keep doing it until, if the demons start coming, then stop. That's my recommendation, is to just, and I mean that seriously. It's not condescending. Is that to just stretch into the uncomfortable and to just experience. And I can do an exercise that just brings us into a deeper level of presence and focus. And I want to add a piece of that, is that, I've been talking about that part of Buddhist practice is understanding the true nature of reality, and seeing that a lot of it is just our mental constructs. And that where this plays out in this work is understanding that we generally categorize people into loved one, stranger, and adversary. And actually, one of the pivots is love thy stranger. That's where we really get love thy neighbor. And we need to expand our idea of neighbor to be global, not just those close to us. And when we get stuck in the polarization of friend or foe, that some people, we can get to love our friends, but to expand that, we're taught that we should love our enemy. And I don't know if that's safe. I don't know if that's smart. And that seems like another form of chronic niceness, to love thy enemy. But just to think about it, statistically, there's got to be at least 7.5 billion strangers in your world that that you can cultivate a sense of love thy stranger to, where you can build alliances. So breaking those mental constructs of who do you see as a stranger now? Will they always be a stranger? Who do you see as an adversary? Is your adversary from their own side an adversary, or have you projected that label on them? And people may have harmed you, and that might be different, but that can change, and that it's not as rigid as we think it is. So I just want to let's just do practice where we can go more into ourselves. I introduce a concept which I call your core, your center. People might know that from movement or sports. It's in your lower belly. This is what I learned from Taoist principles and martial arts. It's approximately the width of 3 fingers below your navel and a third of the way into the body. So if you put your fingers together like this, place your index finger over your navel, where your pinky resides. That's approximately the width of 3 fingers below your navel. Now bring your attention inside of your body about a third of the way. And you want to focus on that point. So sitting in a way where you're in your chair, where you can create lengthening in your spine, where your feet are flat on the floor if possible, just letting your hands rest on your knees, elongating from your neck so you tuck in your chin a little bit, relax your jaw, relax your shoulders, relax your belly. I call this stance like a power sit. And bring your attention inside. If it feels safe for you, close your eyes. If it doesn't, then just keep your eyes slightly open, looking down towards the ground. And bring your full attention to your core, what I would say your place of personal power, gut wisdom, awareness. And what you're doing is you're cultivating. This is not only a Buddhist practice, but this is an important part of the Civility method of helping you regulate your nervous system and determine for yourself in any given moment what feels safe for you or not. So with that awareness from your center, now become aware of the parts of your body that are connecting with what you're sitting on or the ground. Feel the gravity bringing you down closer to the ground. Feeling the stability under you, which your nervous system is picking up the signals stability, which can help your nervous system to drop in and let yourself be held. So feeling your feet on the ground, focusing in your center, bringing awareness to your heart, the middle of your chest, where I would say your heart power resides. Compassion, respect, connection. And with your feet on the ground, focusing in your center and the heart, breathe in deeply through your nose, very slowly, very deeply. In through your nose. Hold the breath at the top of the breath. And on the exhale, just let it pour out of your mouth. Try it again, breathing deep into your belly to start the breath, your lower ribs, your upper ribs, full breath, right up into the top of your ribs. Hold the breath and breathe out through your mouth. Once again, breathing in through your nose, slow breath. Hold the breath at the top of the breath. Maybe breathe in a little bit more through your nose. And release. Just notice the effects so far of the breaths connecting to yourself in this way. Connecting with yourself, bringing yourself into the present moment. Keeping your eyes closed or looking down, becoming aware of your surroundings in all directions, cultivating more sensing behind you, around you. From your core, your personal power, and from your heart, take a moment to just consider your loved ones. Hold them in your heart. Who arises in your heart? What faces do you see? Wishing them well, feeling gratitude. From your center and from your heart, become aware of strangers, someone you may have seen at a supermarket recently, a neighbor, people you saw on the internet, in the news, other parts of the planet, close by. Did that shift your level of safety in any way? And presence? And as you engage and hold those strangers in your heart, how much are you open to wishing them well? And from your center and from your heart, become aware of adversaries. Who arises in your heart? What faces do you see? Did that change your level of safety, your level of open-heartedness, keeping the appropriate distance from them? What does it look like to perhaps even bring those people in your heart? And if you don't, you don't. Just acknowledging them. And with this awareness, take another breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. And slowly open your eyes, look around the room, shake a little bit. That's a short, abbreviated version from something that I've cultivated from my practice.
Thank you, Joe. How did that feel to you guys?
I've done something very similar through therapy, just kind of experiencing just where my stresses are coming from. So my therapist has me do, just kind of that meditation, that breathing meditation, to kind of feel like where in my body that my stress is happening. And so, yeah, familiar. I think familiar.
Yeah.
What were you thinking, Janice?
I mean, I was participating, but I was thinking too much to really feel anything. So, yeah. But I mean, I love meditative practices. So, yeah, I think when I'm less amped, it would be good. But
well, Joe, and I love it because you've told me before that you think Jesus was a great Buddhist.
Did I say that?
You did say that.
I did. Yeah, I think. Yeah. Well, yeah. There's a lot of similarity there. There's yes, certainly.
He was
wisdom,
very
love and wisdom,
self-actualized, right?
Yeah, he was seeking the truth, and it was all about love for him.
You don't even know the wisdom that you've given me that I've moved on to.
That's the story I've heard, at least. That's the story I've heard.
Well, I appreciate the conversation from all y'all tonight, as they say in Oklahoma, right, Jeremy?
All y'all. Yeah,
all y'all.
That's everybody. Yeah. Y'all is plural, and all y'all's all y'all.
All y'all. Y'all.
And so thank you, Joe, for coming and joining us tonight. Where can people find the book?
Well, my website is joeweston.com, and the book Fear Civility you can find on Amazon.
Very good. Well, I was going to show it to everybody. Now I can't find it.
Oh, I got it.
There it is.
Oh, that. There you go. Yeah.
Fear Civility, transforming our global culture from polarization to lasting peace. All right. Awesome. Well, we appreciate you being with us. And by the way, Jeremy, before you wrap us up, that I did want to say, if you haven't listened to last week's show, we did some Buddhist practice tonight, Janice did some tarot and
Yo,
in our,
I'm just
in
gonna
our-
say, I'll be coming to visit you, Paul. I'm not gonna share why, but I've got a bag of rocks.
but it was it was a great show last week, so everybody's got a little.
It's going to err on this side a little bit more fierce than civility, I think.
Hey, we got to follow every word of God's word, my friend. And
Well, but I mean,
prophets
listen,
get stoned if they don't come through with the truth.
yeah, y'all are the ones who made the deal. I just said I'd follow through. So, no, I was actually really shocked. I walked away last week with some of the things that both of you had said, and I got a chance to talk with both of you. So some of those things are coming to fruition. It's exciting, but
Yes.
nevertheless, Paul, we've really enjoyed having you on the show. We'll see you in the next live.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, everyone, we are off next week. It's a planned break we take every once in a while, but we'll be back in a couple of weeks, right?
Yes. Yeah. So for those of you listening, we appreciate you. We know tonight's conversation certainly was challenging. But what I loved about tonight's conversation was the honest and compassionate dialogue about seeing perspectives. And I think that matters. And so I'm grateful that we had a space where everyone could share their perspective here. And we're grateful for an audience that makes this a safe space to do that. So anyway, so we're grateful for Joe for hopping on with us tonight and being an amazing guest. For Paul and Janice, I'm Jeremy. Thank you so much for listening tonight, and we will see you in a couple of weeks.
Good night, everyone.